Hello, dear learners. Welcome back to a warm corner of stories and growth. If you're new here, subscribe to stay inspired. This is Learn English Through Story. Watch until the end to see what happens next. A message appeared on Elena's phone at 2:14 a.m. Do not think about the door. No name, no context, just that sentence, bright and cold in the blue light. She wasn't expecting anyone, yet she felt watched by something patient and precise. She looked around her small apartment. The houseplants, the books, the kettle resting like a sleeping bird. No door stood out, and yet her heart insisted there was a door that mattered. Elena worked days at a rehabilitation clinic, teaching patients how to rebuild movement one slow step at a time. She believed in muscles, practice, and patience, old truths. She did not, as a rule, believe in messages that felt like traps. Still, the sentence hummed in her mind. Do not think about the door. Of course she thought about it. Anyone would. At dawn, the city breathed out mist. She walked the corridor that connected the clinic's old wing to the new wing, a place where lights made a soft halo on the floor. On the left wall hung a bulletin board, crowded with flyers. A new sheet of paper had been pinned there, cream-colored, almost formal. The power of your mind. Noon talk, room 3B. A small arrow pointed along the corridor. No signatures, just a time. Room 3B was usually locked. Elena knew because it held old equipment nobody used. But when she tested the handle, it turned with a gentle click, like a secret saying yes. Inside, dust motes swam in the square of sunlight. A single chair waited in the center, facing a whiteboard that held one sentence. Your mind is a lens. She stood at the doorway, half amused, half drawn closer. The whiteboard marker lay uncapped. Someone had written the words not long ago. She checked the time, 11:58 a.m., 2 minutes early. She laughed softly at herself. This had to be a staff prank. But something about the quiet room felt like the inside of a thought, thick and focused. At noon exactly, a figure appeared in the doorway across the hall, reflected in the glass. A man in a charcoal sweater, hair streaked with silver, eyes steady as if measuring light. He stepped in without hurry. You came, he said, as if he had invited her personally. Good. Is this open to staff? She asked. It's open to anyone who has noticed the door. Her chest tightened. What do you mean? He tapped the whiteboard gently. A lens can burn a hole in paper, or it can light a candle. Your mind works the same way. Most people scatter light. You have learned to hold it steady, at least sometimes. That's why you felt the sentence pull you here. I got a message, she began, but he lifted a hand, not to silence her, but to hold the moment. Today, he said, you will test the power of your mind, not with magic, with attention. He placed a small metronome on the desk and set it ticking. The sound filled the room like a second heart. Think of the door, he said. Then do not think of the door. Watch what your thoughts do to you. Elena sat in the lone chair. She tried to picture a door, any door. Her grandmother's kitchen door, blue with chip paint. The hospital's heavy fire doors. The door to her own apartment, squeaking when it rained. Images multiplied. Her pulse climbed with them. Now, he said softly, do not think of the door. The image rushed back, stronger, as if her mind were laughing at the rule. The metronome ticked. Her breath shortened. He smiled, not kindly, not cruelly, simply as someone who recognized a familiar law. See? The mind obeys pictures, not negations. He drew a circle on the whiteboard, then shaded a small center. When you push thought away, you feed it. When you choose a better thought, you starve the worst one. We will practice choosing. A pulse of wind from the vent stirred the paper on the desk. The metronome ticked on. Elena felt the edges of the day sharpen, as if the city had moved a fraction closer to her. Why me? She asked. Because you read the sentence, he said, and because you kept reading it in your head. Outside, a gurney squeaked down the hall. Inside, a sentence turned and turned again. Elena leaned forward. Then show me how. He nodded, pleased. Very well. We begin with a candle. The days in Marco's village stretched long, but his nights were even longer. Sleep rarely came, and when it did, it was broken by dreams where shadows of his past mistakes whispered accusations. By morning, he woke with a heavy chest, as if he had already fought a war before the sun had risen. People around him noticed. His friends called him distant. His neighbors pitied him, and even his mother sighed when she saw his hollow eyes. They told him to cheer up, to move on, to stop overthinking. But none of those words reached his heart. For Marco, thoughts were not something he could simply turn off. They were like a river, endless and merciless, flooding every corner of his mind. He often walked through the village square, watching children laugh freely, their faces glowing with innocence. How he longed to feel that way again. Yet, instead of joining their joy, he envied it. His mind whispered cruelly, "You will never be like them. Your heart is too heavy. Your life is already broken." One evening, Marco overheard two travelers speaking. They spoke of a man who lived far in the hills, an old sage who once was a great psychologist in the city. "He teaches people how to free themselves from their thoughts," one traveler said. "He shows them the hidden power of the mind." Those words clung to Marco's soul. For the first time in months, he felt a spark of hope. That very night, he packed a small bag, just bread, water, and a blanket, and promised himself that at dawn he would begin his journey. The path was long and difficult. Marco climbed narrow trails where the wind howled and dust stung his eyes. He crossed rivers that nearly pulled him under, and he slept under cold skies with only stars for company. Yet every step carried him closer to the old man, and that hope gave him strength he didn't know he had. After 5 days, exhausted and trembling, Marco reached a village hidden in the hills. It was quiet, surrounded by tall trees and singing birds. At the edge of the village stood a small house covered in vines. On its porch sat an old man with closed eyes, his face calm as the evening sky. Marco hesitated. His heart raced, his palms were wet with sweat. What if the man refused to help him? What if his journey was for nothing? Still, with trembling lips he whispered, "Grandfather, my mind is a storm. I cannot control my thoughts. I am lost. Please, teach me peace." The old man opened his eyes slowly and smiled. His gaze was deep, yet gentle, like water that reflected the entire sky. Without a word, he stood up, filled a glass of water to the brim, and handed it to Marco. "Walk to the edge of the village and back," he said softly, "but do not spill a single drop." Marco stared at the glass, confused. What could this possibly teach him? Yet, without argument, he began his careful walk. Step by step, his eyes never left the trembling water. He ignored the children playing, the barking dogs, the curious villagers. All that mattered was the glass. When he returned, not a drop was lost. The old man nodded. "Tell me," he asked, "what did you see on your way?" Marco shook his head. "Nothing. I was only watching the water." The old man's smile deepened. "Then you already know the first secret of the mind." For the first time in years, Marco felt silence inside his head. The old man led Marco to his small yard, where a single candle stood unlit on a stone table. The evening sky was turning violet, and the first stars had begun to glow. The air smelled of pine and quiet earth. "Sit," the old man said, his voice carrying no urgency, as if time itself moved at his command. Marco obeyed. The old man struck a match, and the candle's small flame came alive. It wavered in the breeze but held steady, glowing softly in the darkening yard. "Your mind," the old man began, "is like this flame. When the wind is gentle, it burns clearly. But when storms come, the flame shakes, flickers, and may even die. Most people live their whole lives at the mercy of every storm. But the wise learn to protect the flame. They learn that the wind is real, but so is the glass shield they can build." Marco watched the flame. His thoughts wanted to wander, back to his mistakes, forward his fears, but the light pulled him back again and again. "How do I build this shield?" Marco asked. The old man smiled. "With practice, with discipline, with choice. You do not control the wind, but you can learn not to follow every gust." He placed a glass cover over the candle. Instantly, the flame stood tall, no longer trembling. "See? The wind still moves, but the flame remains. Marco's chest tightened. For years, he had been nothing but the flame in the storm, shaking, bending, nearly breaking. Could he really learn to be steady? Close your eyes, the old man instructed. Breathe. Do not fight your thoughts. Do not chase them. Let them pass like clouds. At first, Marco's mind roared louder than ever. Thoughts of failure shouted in his ears. Memories of shame burned his chest. Fear of the future clamped his stomach. His hands trembled, and he wanted to open his eyes to run away from the noise. But the old man's voice anchored him. Breathe. Let the storm pass. Stay with the flame inside. Slowly, very slowly, Marco felt something shift. The thoughts were still there, but they no longer pulled him under. They drifted past, like leaves carried on a stream. Beneath them, he sensed a quiet space, small but real. When he opened his eyes, the candle still burned, steady under its glass. His breath came easier. For the first time in years, Marco realized he had touched peace. Not because the world had changed, but because he had changed how he saw it. Tears filled his eyes. "Is this the power of the mind?" he whispered. The old man nodded. "This is the beginning. The greatest prison is not outside you. It is inside. And the greatest freedom is not given. It is trained." The word struck Marco's heart like bells ringing through the valley. He understood peace was not a gift someone could hand him. It was a skill he must learn, a discipline he must practice every single day. The old man pointed to the candle. "Tomorrow, you will learn how to carry the flame into the storm itself. Only then will you see how powerful your mind truly is." Marco sat in silence, watching the candles glow. For the first time in years, he believed that his storm could end, not by escaping it, but by walking straight through it, carrying his own light. The next morning, the sky broke open with restless clouds. Wind rushed through the trees, scattering leaves across the ground. Marco stood outside the old man's house, the candle cupped in his trembling hands. "Today," the sage said, "you will carry the flame through the village square. You must not let it die." Marco frowned. "But the wind, it's too strong." The old man's gaze was steady. "The world will never stop moving. It is you who must learn to move differently." With that, Marco began his walk. The path wound through the village, alive with noise. Children shouted as they played. Shopkeepers argued over prices. Dogs barked fiercely at one another. A cart rolled by, its wheels groaning against the stones. Marco's flame trembled with every sound, every gust of air. His heart pounded. He wanted to cover the candle with both hands, to hide it from the chaos. But the sage's words echoed inside him. "You cannot silence the world. You must carry the flame through it." So he adjusted his breath, slower, steadier. His eyes stayed fixed on the flame, not the distractions. The laughter, the arguments, the barking, they all swirled around him, but his steps grew calm, deliberate. Halfway across the square, a sudden gust nearly snuffed out the candle. The flame bent, thin as a whisper. Marco froze, panic surging through him. His old thoughts leapt back into his mind. "You can't do this. You always fail. The storm will crush you." But then something new answered. "No, the storm is not me. The flame is me." With that, he cupped the candle, not hiding it, but protecting it. He bent his body with the wind instead of resisting it. Slowly, the flame rose again, steady and alive. When Marco finally returned to the old man's porch, sweat covered his forehead, but the candle still burned. The sage's eyes glowed with approval. "You see," the old man said softly, "the world is noisy. It will always pull, always tempt, always test you. But peace is not found in escaping the noise. Peace is found in carrying your flame through it." Marco looked down at the light in awe. "Then, the real power of the mind is not silence. It is strength." The sage nodded. "Strength, yes, but not the strength of muscles. It is the strength of choosing where your attention lives. A weak mind is dragged everywhere. A strong mind chooses its path. And once you master that, no storm can take your peace away." That night, Marco lay awake under the stars. For the first time, his thoughts did not scream. They still appeared, Memories of the past, fears of the future, but he no longer chased them. He watched them come and go, while the quiet flame inside him burned steady. And as he closed his eyes, Marco whispered to himself, "I am not the storm. I am the flame." He slept deeply, peacefully, like a man who had just stepped out of a prison he never knew he had built. When dawn came, Marco felt lighter, as though his body had shed years of invisible weight. His steps were quiet but firm as he walked back to the old man's porch. The sage was already awake, watering a row of herbs, his hands steady as the morning breeze. "Today," the old man said, "your test will not be with candles or storms. It will be with people." Marco frowned. "With people?" The sage nodded. "Your mind is not only shaken by your own thoughts. It bends to the words and actions of others. If you can carry your peace among them, then you are beginning to master the true power of the mind." That morning, Marco went to the village market. It was crowded, alive with bargaining voices and impatient movements. At once, Marco felt the old weight tug at him. Every raised voice sounded like an accusation. Every impatient glance felt like judgment. His heart wanted to shrink, to hide. At a fruit stall, the seller scolded him. "Move aside. You're blocking the line." The words pierced Marco's chest, and for a moment his old thoughts rushed back. "I am always in the way. I don't belong here." But then he remembered the candle, the flame, the quiet space inside. He breathed slowly and imagined a glass shield around his mind. He did not argue. He simply stepped aside, calm, steady. To his surprise, the insult lost its sting. It was just sound passing air. The flame remained. Later, in the square, a group of boys mocked his worn clothes. Their laughter echoed like thunder, yet Marco's mind did not collapse. He saw them clearly. Children chasing amusement, not enemies. Their words touched the surface of his mind but did not enter. By midday, Marco felt something astonishing. The world was the same. The chaos, the noise, the unkindness. But inside, he was different. He was no longer a prisoner of every passing opinion. When he returned, the old man studied his face and smiled. "So, what did you learn?" Marco's voice trembled with wonder. "That people's words are like the wind. They can only blow where I allow them. Before, I let them break me. Today, I let them pass." The old man's eyes softened. "Good. But remember, strength is not coldness. To master the mind does not mean to shut out the world. It means to stay steady enough to choose how you respond. A shield can protect, but it can also reflect light. Use your mind to give peace, not just to guard it." That night, Marco thought about those words. Could he truly use his mind not just for himself, but for others? He remembered the fruit seller's sharp voice, the boys' laughter. Instead of anger, he now felt compassion. Perhaps they too carried storms inside. As he drifted into sleep, Marco realized the power of the mind was not only survival, it was transformation. What had once been his prison could become his gift. In the following days, Marco began to notice changes he had never expected. It was not the world that had grown gentler. It was his heart. The same noisy market, the same impatient villagers, the same endless chatter surrounded him. Yet instead of feeling crushed, Marco found himself breathing more deeply, smiling more often, and speaking with calmness even when others were harsh. One morning, as he helped an old woman carry a basket of firewood, she paused to study him. "Young man," she said, "your eyes are different. They are quiet now, like water that has stopped trembling." Her words startled him. He had not realized others could see the shift inside. That evening, Marco shared this with the sage. The old man's face lit up. "Yes, that is the next truth. When your mind is noisy, you pass your storm to others without knowing. But when your mind is steady, you pass your calm instead. Peace spreads as surely as fire spreads from one candle to another." He placed 2 candles on the table, one lit, one dark. Then, with a single touch, he brought the flame from the first to the second. Soon both glowed brightly. "You see? Your light is no longer only for you. The power of your mind can awaken the minds of others." The next day, Marco decided to test this truth. At the riverbank, he found two men arguing bitterly over fishing nets. Their voices rose like thunder, and a small crowd gathered, feeding the anger with their own whispers. Normally, Marco would have walked away, too afraid of the storm. But this time he stepped closer. He did not shout. He did not take sides. He simply stood, breathing steadily, his presence calm as the river itself. His eyes met theirs, not with judgment, but with quiet strength. Something shifted. The men's voices softened, their anger losing fire. One muttered, "Perhaps we should divide the nets differently," and the other agreed reluctantly. The crowd dispersed, surprised by how quickly the storm had ended. Marco's chest filled with awe. He had not spoken a single word, yet his calmness had spread like ripples through the scene. The old man had been right. The flame was contagious. That evening, Marco asked, "Is this the final lesson? To carry peace for others?" The sage shook his head. "It is a great lesson, but not the last. Many will find comfort in your calm. But storms far greater than arguments await you. Someday, your mind will be tested not by small winds, but by tempests that shake the soul. You must be ready, not only to share peace, but to hold it even when the whole world falls apart." Marco swallowed hard. His journey had already changed him, yet he sensed the old man spoke of trials beyond imagination. That night, under the starry sky, Marco lay awake. His mind was quiet, but his heart was alive with anticipation. What storm could be greater than the ones he had already faced? And would his flame burn bright enough to survive it? The morning arrived heavy with silence. Clouds gathered like dark armies above the hills, and the wind carried the taste of rain. The sage stood at the edge of the village, his staff planted firmly in the ground. Marco joined him, uneasy at the sight of the sky. "Today," the old man said, "you will face the storm that has always lived within you." Marco's heart tightened. "You mean my memories?" The sage nodded. "The pain you run from, the shame you carry, the fears you bury. They are the true storm. Until you meet them face to face, your flame will always tremble." Together they climbed to a high ridge overlooking the valley. The sky roared, thunder cracking like iron chains breaking apart. The sage stopped, turned to Marco, and spoke with gravity. "Close your eyes. Let the storm rise. Do not fight it. Do not run. Look directly at what you fear." Marco obeyed. At once, his mind filled with shadows. He saw himself as a boy, standing helpless as his father shouted in anger. He saw the mistakes of his youth, the friendships broken by pride, the opportunities wasted through fear. He saw himself older, alone, a man who had let life slip away. The voices grew cruel. "You are weak. You are nothing. You will never change." Marco's knees buckled. He wanted to scream, to cover his ears, to run down the mountain and hide. The storm inside was louder than the thunder outside. His candle felt ready to vanish. But then, from deep within, he remembered, "I am not the storm. I am the flame." He pictured the small candle, steady under its glass. He breathed, slow and deep. The shadows howled, but he did not chase them. The voices mocked, but he did not argue. He stood still, and with each breath, the flame in his mind grew brighter. The thunder rolled. The rain lashed his face, but inside, a calm spread wider than the storm itself. At last, Marco opened his eyes. The world was drenched, the valley below a blur of silver rain. But inside him, silence reigned. The memories were still there, the wounds still real, but they no longer owned him. The sage watched quietly, his eyes glistening with pride. "You have seen the storm, and you have kept the flame. Remember this moment. It will guide you all your life." Marco fell to his knees, tears mixing with rain. He was exhausted, but free in a way he had never known. The prison he had lived in for years had collapsed, and in its place stood a vast open sky. That night, as the storm passed and stars returned, Marco felt reborn. He understood now. The true power of the mind was not to escape pain, but to face it and remain whole. The flame within him no longer felt fragile. It felt eternal. When the storm finally cleared, the valley lay washed and shining, every leaf glittering with silver rain. Marco stood at the ridge, his clothes heavy with water, his heart light as air. For the first time in his life, he did not fear his own mind. The sage touched his shoulder gently. You are ready. Return to your people. Carry your flame not only for yourself, but for those still lost in their storms. Marco bowed deeply. His journey had begun with desperation, but now it ended with a gift, a flame he could never lose. Back in his village, people noticed a change instantly. The restless young man who once walked with downcast eyes now moved with quiet strength. His mother, seeing him at the doorway, gasped, "My son, your face, it shines." Children who once teased him now gathered near, sensing the calm he carried. Neighbors came to him with their troubles, and somehow, just by listening with steady eyes and steady breath, he made their burdens feel lighter. One afternoon, Marco found a friend sitting by the river, weeping over a failed harvest. Once, Marco would have drowned with him in sorrow, but now he sat quietly, placed a hand on his friend's shoulder, and said softly, "Your pain is real, but it is not you. You are more than this storm." His friend lifted his head, startled. In Marco's gaze, he saw not pity, but strength. For the first time, he believed he too could endure. Weeks passed, and word spread of the young man who carried peace like a lantern. Strangers came from other villages to meet him, hoping for advice. Marco never claimed to be wise. He simply shared the truths the sage had given him. The mind is a flame. Protect it, and it will guide you. Do not fight the storm. Learn to walk through it. What you focus on grows. Choose carefully what you feed with your thoughts. Each time he spoke these words, Marco felt their power deepen inside himself. Teaching others became the way he kept his own flame bright. One evening, as the sun set and birds returned to their nests, Marco walked alone to the edge of the village. The hills glowed gold, the same hills he had once climbed in desperation. He closed his eyes and felt the stillness within. The storms of life would return. Of that, he was certain, but now he no longer feared them. He carried a light that no wind could extinguish. The words of sage echoed in his heart. Peace is not outside you. It is already inside you, waiting for you to live in the present. Marco smiled, and for the first time, it was not a fleeting smile, but one rooted in strength. He had discovered the true power of the mind, not as a weapon against life, but as a flame to live by. And from that day forward, wherever he walked, others felt the glow of that flame and were reminded of their own. Herb lesson for learners. The story of Marco shows us that the mind is both our prison and our freedom. In English, notice how imagery, the storm, the flame, turns ideas into feelings. These metaphors are powerful tools in storytelling and in daily speech. Vocabulary such as steady, tremble, shield, burden, and endure builds emotional depth. To practice, retell Marco's journey in your own words. Describe a moment when you felt like the storm was stronger than you, and then imagine yourself carrying the flame. This not only improves your English, but also strengthens your inner voice. Sparkles, thank you, dear learner, for walking this journey through story and language. If this tale inspired you, remember to subscribe, like, and share your thoughts. Speech balloon question for you. What is one thought you would choose to feed, and one thought you would choose to starve? If your mind is truly a flame,